So this literally happened to me today, and it really got me to thinking. It was this morning during shift change, and one of my coworkers was just like kind of talking, and on her way out, she says something about reading auras, that she can read auras. Well, of course, that's interesting. And I'm like, started asking her questions. Did you pass gas? I think you did. Sachi. Anyway, so, being ever curious, I kind of wanted to know what she thought about me, but I didn't really want to ask. So she volunteered the information and she said something that was absolutely on spot correct. She says that I am a very private person, and although it looks like I have an open door, I actually will let people walk in the door, but behind the door is like you only get so far, and there's this brick wall. And she said, no one will ever get past that wall. She said, people think they're in your inner circle, but they're not, because actually no one will ever be in that inner circle. And she said it's because of the hurt that you've had in the past. And I was like, you are absolutely correct, ma'am. And while I love people dearly and I do share a lot of my life with them, there is definitely things that I decided a few years ago, when I had my last best friend breakup, which is so much harder in a lot of ways than the breakup with a male. I honestly thought this woman would be friends till we died, and it just no, no. And I'm not going to get into the details of that, but then I had another friend that came along a few years later, and I really thought, I knew this person. I thought, here's someone I could confide in and trust. And I found out, no, I did not know that person at all either. So, and that was the last time was about a couple of years ago. And after that, I just shut down. I'm like, okay, we are, yeah, no one is going to get that close anymore. It's not going to happen. So, she goes on to describe to me how, you know, even different family, even pets, no one can breach the wall that I have put up. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Y'all are probably like, oh my God, that's horrible. Nah, to me, I very much have my own spirituality, my own relationship with God. So I never feel lonely. But it got me to thinking about something I've been hearing about a lot lately, and that is the loneliness epidemic. And I've heard that men are especially more vulnerable. So I started researching, what is the loneliness epidemic? Who does it affect? What, like I don't know. Tell me more about this. And here is what I found out. It is actually quite horrifying. Let me just tell you now, I'm going to go through some statistics. They're not going to be as interesting, and I'm going to go through the answers that I was first given for a solution, and I was like, that sucks, buddy. And then we're going to land on what I think will actually work. Getting a cat that wants to be sitting on your head all the time. That will break your loneliness. Okay, I'm going to breeze through this real quick. This was kind of shocking for me. Who is really lonely? Not who you think. We always think it's the elderly, right? Like the really old people whose maybe spouses died or whatever. But no, studies show that 29%, which is the largest percentage in this group, is between the ages of 30. Wow, that's young. 30 and 44. 29% of those people are having this loneliness crisis. I'm like, that's kind of insane. You're right in the middle of life and all kind of changes and doing and kids and careers. Like, how are you lonely? But then studies found something interesting. It's not like that in other countries necessarily. However, it is like that in Canada. Same age group. Only the Canadians are even more lonely in that age group. Wow. So it is a North America thing. Now, you would think that Gen X, which is a little bit older than the highest group, would be lonelier. But no, we're 20%. So I think part of that too has to be with just being the forgotten generation, We're kind of used to it. All right, but let's scoot on by some other stuff. Now, these are the typical reasons. And again, I found this really kind of boring and like a no brainer, like, duh. They're giving the work identity crisis. This is like Gen X. We're in the caregiving squeeze. We've got kids, we've got parents, we've got kids we're trying to support. We've got parents that are older and, need help. The economic pressures that come with both of those. And, getting older, trying to come to terms with our own, what do we have to do before we retire, before we get there? We have a lot of stress in the workplace, like, if we need to take unpaid leave, or some people still have problems with childcare at this age. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they say is kind of putting the pressure on Gen X. Also, technology, strangely enough. 73% of people say that technology actually contributes to their loneliness, which is crazy, right? I mean, we're literally in the age where we can keep up with people, even old past acquaintances like high school friends. We can connect with everybody instantaneously, and yet the world is lonelier than ever. But let's go on. And I promise we're going to get through all this boring stuff and get to the real solution. I am going to land right here for a second, though, because look at this. These headlines were crazy to me, but I did look this up. Loneliness is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's almost a pack a day. How can it be? Oh my gosh. I mean, that's deadly. 50% of people who have this kind of loneliness are at an increased risk of dementia, 32% increased risk of stroke, 29 heart disease. Overall, 81% of lonely adults often also suffer from anxiety or depression. And this just creates the vicious cycle of isolation. Now, that I did find statistically horrific. And you can read this. It's about what loneliness actually feels like. It's literally being alone in a room full of people, feeling alone. And they're talking about whether you're at work, at family gatherings, whatever, you still feel lonely. Now, I would also put out there that a marriage to the wrong person or to a person who doesn't engage with you correctly will also make you feel profoundly lonely. Lonelier being in a relationship than you are being single. And if you have ever experienced that, you know what I'm talking about. I have never felt lonelier than when I was in a bad relationship. Now I'm going to skip over to the first thing that the internet told me would fix this solution. This is the answer to all your problems, y'all. To reach out to family and friends regularly, practice self-compassion, service and volunteering, which I actually do agree. That is the only one I really agreed with. They're talking about community groups, a work-life balance. I literally got into an argument with my AI, and I'm like, sounds very trite. This is not going to help. This is not helpful for me. This is like putting a normal band-aid on a festering wound and expecting something to heal. Well, my AI was not all that impressed with my thoughts, but as AIs do, as they're trained to do, it went deeper and started looking for me, and of course, in the end, agreed with me. Again, that's just something AI does. But I said, I need a better list. This is crap. And so these are things I actually think will work. And this is if you're single, married. Let me just interject right here that I had a conversation with a good friend of mine. And she was talking about how she was feeling some emptiness in her relationship, in her marriage. And she said, I want, him to be my best friend. I want, us to do all these things. And I want him to be the one person that I want to spend all, my life with. Well, yeah, of course. We all want that. But here's what I also wanted her to understand, that while we can have a great relationship with our spouse, boyfriend, whoever, It is ridiculous to put all that pressure on one person, to think that you can get every need met, every emotional, mental, whatever need met in one person. Now, I'm not talking about polygamy and all this kind of stuff. I'm talking about just interactions with people. I'm like, you need people. You need a best female friend. You need some good male influences, maybe family or some kind of, like, not anything that's going to threaten your marriage, obviously, but maybe some other input from males. You need work friends. You need people. You need people from different walks of life. We weren't meant to do this alone, not completely. And so I told her, your relationship, yeah, while you can have problems from time to time, don't put all of your eggs in that one basket, because what if something happens? That person, God forbid, dies, or you break up. Then your whole world crashes. No one should be responsible for meeting all the emotional needs of another human. We were not designed to carry that burden. So, what do? Maybe you found yourself widowed. Maybe you found yourself divorced and you're just too busy working and life stress. You just can't seem to connect, and the loneliness is growing and growing. Well, here are some things that I did agree with, and I feel like even if you just put a couple of them into practice, you can change the way that you feel and avoid that whole 15 cigarettes a day, 81% of, depression, all that kind of madness. So let's look at this. Now, when I looked deeper, I found out that there were places called third places. Now, what is that? Your first place is your home. Your second place is your work, usually your job. But people used to have third places, and there was a lot more activity in these places than we ever see today. Now, these were places like libraries, coffee shops, diners, parks, community centers, where things are going on without a formal agenda. Now, it's true that even if you go to the park and you sit around and you look at other people absorbing the sunshine, you're going to see that they're doing it on their phone, because everybody is really just absorbed into social media. They're not breathing, they're not really enjoying the third spaces. So that leads us to the problem of rebuilding our own infrastructure, because now we have isolated ourselves with social media and with just differences. The differences in politics, what this person thinks, left, right, whatever. We are so isolated. We have to rebuild our infrastructure with people. Now, they kind of looked at the men's shed model, which I do believe is very much a male thing and a way to connect. They say that men don't talk face to face, they talk shoulder to shoulder. What that means is that men develop relationships with other people by doing something, like maybe they're working on a car together or a physical project. They're not really engaged in face to face conversation. They're not meeting for coffee like women do and pouring our souls out. No, they're building something, working on something. And as they do this, they are developing relationship with other men. I mean, it's easier this way because there's no awkwardness. Like even silence, you're doing something. It's not like sitting and staring at somebody else. And the focus is on the tasks, not on the friendship. But that is a positive side effect. And I definitely see how that works for men. So if you are a man feeling this loneliness, and I know that sometimes you just want companionship from a woman, unfortunately, what a lot of men are looking for is the companionship, as in somebody please cook me dinner and do my laundry. Now, if you are a Gen X man looking for that, you're probably not going to find it. Unless you are very wealthy and you have a trophy wife. So, the rest of you, you're going to have to figure something else out. Because we're done. We're done with that. But now, if you want to build relationships and build that infrastructure and decrease the loneliness, look at things that you can do in the community. And I mean, volunteer, definitely. I think that is a great one, especially things like if you're a carpenter, Habitat for Humanity, if you're retired or whatever, you just work part time. give some of your time to doing something else, a skill. Or maybe you're into gardening or cooking or something like that. Take a class, join a community gathering. Maybe you like to walk or hike, or maybe you are a bookworm. Join a book club that actually talks about the book and discusses, different theories. Maybe you're more of a studious person. But definitely something service oriented, whether it's an animal shelter or something like that. Not only does it force you to interact with other people shoulder to shoulder, but it also makes you feel good about yourself. You end the day, even if you didn't have a really meaningful human conversation that day, you have a really good sense of self, a pride in what you have done. And that's going to raise your dopamine level. That's going to make you feel better. Go out and do it again. Now, another thing that people want to do is we all want to have this BFF, our best friend, our soulmate, whether that's just another female or a male or whatever, like a platonic relationship, but we crave that BFF. What we don't understand is that there is a lot of power in what people call weak ties. Okay, this isn't a BFF relationship, but it is a consistent relationship. These could be small but regular conversations that you have with the librarian. If you go in there, does anybody go to the library? I love libraries still, but if you go in there, or in the coffee shop, the baristas, the door greeters at Walmart, or wherever you shop, whatever you do, the hardware store, the small conversations that you have with people on a regular basis are what we call weak ties. But don't underestimate the importance, because here's what happens. If you make it a habit, let's say you go to that coffee shop every day or that library or wherever it is that you choose to go to just kill time, when you have conversations with the people that work there, let's just take the coffee shop for example. Now, let's say you go in there several times a week and you make it a regular thing. You go about the same time every day. You sit close to the same spot. You start talking to the baristas or whatever. You will start to see that there are familiar faces if you do this long enough. You will begin to recognize people. And guess what? The staff will begin to recognize you. Say you go for lunch. Let's say that you have one meal out a day and you go to the same diner. Those people will get to know you and you will get to see the regulars as well. Now, this weak ties still on a psychological level gives you a sense of belonging. It gives you that sense of community. And these people don't have to know your business. They don't have to be your best friend. But all of a sudden, that little recognition makes you feel not so lonely anymore. So it doesn't matter if the barista has a different political side than you do. You don't even have to talk politics. It is just that familiarity. So don't downplay that, because that can really give you a huge psychological boost. There are also the micro interactions. Like you take a walk every day and you just greet people, hello. Now, this is something that we do in the South, but they don't necessarily do it in other parts of the country. Maybe just a head nod, something like that. Micro interactions. Again, you sometimes start to see the same people. Now, here is another strategy that I really am in favor of, but I don't see anybody doing it. I feel like as time goes on, and maybe as the economy gets worse and worse, we will end up doing more of this. But they're talking about co-housing, co-housing and intentional communities. And this is something that is actually being pioneered in Denmark. And I'm just going to say, go Denmark, because I think you're onto something. Now, in a co-housing situation, everybody has their own space, like their own little apartment, whatever, but there is a communal space, like a kitchen or whatever. Now, this is not the same as a clubhouse, an apartment complex, because you never see anybody there. But there might be a large kitchen, a dining area, or a workshop area, or a garden space, or whatever, that you can be as friendly or as distant with your neighbors as you want. But the point is, you are part of a community. You don't have to go to everybody's house for supper or have them over. But if you are in that communal kitchen or that communal space, you do get to know the familiar faces. And I think this is important. I mean, think how many times that we've heard of people that were found unalive in their house for 2 weeks before anybody discovered them, right? Because they just didn't have these micro interactions. Nobody knew. They were kind of a hermit. Maybe they didn't mean to be. Maybe they just didn't know how to make other acquaintances. Maybe they lived in that delusion that if I don't have a best friend or a soulmate, I'm just going to die alone. Well, no, because these micro interactions are important. And that's why I think this co housing thing is a great idea. Now, that being said, you're always going to have that one that doesn't want to clean their yard or doesn't, you're always going to have somebody who's going to get on your nerves. We know that. It's better than dying alone. Now, another thing that I think is really important is the trap of how we think about loneliness. We always think about if we're not with somebody, we're lonely. It's a horrible thing. It's a curse. I'm by myself. I have to watch a movie by myself. I have to sit in my living room on a Saturday night by myself. But studies have shown that actually it is your mind that is causing this problem. A simple reframing, 10 minutes of just shutting everything down, closing your eyes, and thinking, this is solitude, not loneliness. And you start telling yourself the benefits of solitude. And maybe if you don't know, check ChatGPT, make a list. All the reasons that solitude is actually good for your system. Now, they found out that people who thought about this for 10 minutes prior to being alone found their alone time not lonely anymore, but refreshing, calm, relaxing. Whew. Now, I'm an only child, and I learned to do this at a very early age. So, I guess it's kind of self soothing. But honestly, I'm the type of person that if I don't have some alone time, some solitude, my head will explode. Like, I shut down. I've got to be left alone, and I can love y'all all day. But if I don't have some time to just hear nothing but my own thoughts, even if I'm just watching YouTube, whatever, I need to be alone. I need solitude. And like I said, I've never viewed that as loneliness. And now here's the last thing that I want to say. If you are still with me, and I hope you have, because I really feel like this video could benefit somebody. And maybe it's you. But I think in conclusion, the last thing we need to understand is that loneliness is inevitable. It is a human condition, just like disappointment, betrayal, happiness, all of the other things. Loneliness is going to factor in at some point. But what you do with that loneliness is going to determine the whole outcome. Now, hear me out. I'm not just spouting stuff. This is stuff that I know from being a solitary person. Solitude, even what they call loneliness, can actually develop something in you that cannot be developed any other way. If you are truly lonely and bored, going inside of yourself can spark a lot of miraculous things, such as creativity. It's not looking for something to cure your loneliness. It is asking yourself, how is loneliness? How can it transform me? How can this make me better? Well, you can lose yourself in studies, learning. Again, you can apply yourself to a hobby you never thought of. Going inside yourself and doing something rather than wallowing in loneliness is actually going to make you better. And in the long run, I always feel like I never have time. People have told me, I don't know what I'm going to do when I retire. I have no idea what. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot wait to retire because I have so many hobbies, so many things I want to know. And there are even things I want to know that I didn't know I wanted to know last week. I remember about 5 or 6 years ago when I embarked on a study in quantum physics. Now, I would have never thought that I was interested in quantum physics, but lo and behold, I was sitting here in solitude and something sparked and it asked a question. I looked it up. I looked up a video and then I was hooked. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is fascinating. Who would have known? Now, I'll be honest, I don't understand a lot of it. It's really technical. But what I can tell you is that it developed in me a love for quantum physics and the exploration of things I never thought. Again, you can choose to sit in your chair or your living room and say, oh, poor me, I'm so lonely. Or you can use that opportunity to learn more about yourself, push yourself, make those micro connections. And I honestly believe this. If people just took one of these suggestions and did them for like maybe a couple of weeks, go out, have the same routine, talk to people, whatever, whichever one, I feel like you would see a big transformation in the cohesiveness of how you don't feel lonely, like you're all by yourself on this planet, but that you are a part of people. And isn't that the goal? Just to feel some kind of connection. And it's up to you how deep you want that connection to go. So if, like me, you're hiding behind a wall, it's okay. I still come out and I still have meaningful conversations and interactions with people. And I love people on a deep level. Okay? And I don't view myself as flawed or broken. It's just who I am. And hopefully, I won't pass along and my cat eat me. So, there's that. I know, I got a little bit macabre. Whatever. But anyway, I hope this made you think a little bit and tell me, do you have any ideas, any suggestions on ways to feel more connected to beat this loneliness epidemic? I would love to hear from you. All right. Stay safe out there. Whatever you do, just stay silky. Bye bye.